This video is designed to teach you about symbiosis. The general definition for symbiosis is any two species that live closely together. As you'll see through the course of this video, these interactions can be beneficial to both species, they can be beneficial to one, or they can even be harmful. But symbiosis is just a blanket term that refers to all these different interactions when two species are closely interacting with one another. The first kind that we're really going to get into is referred to as mutualism. And as the name implies, this is a mutual interaction. So both species are benefiting in this instance. The key to many of these terms, and many terms in biology, is just looking for root words. So mutual is telling us that both of the individual species are benefiting from this particular interaction. A good example of this kind of symbiosis is looking at the relationship between a bee and a flower. In this case, they are both benefiting. The bee benefits by getting nectar from the flower that it uses to make honey. The flower benefits because the bee acts as a pollinator. Bees have all these little hairs on their legs, and as they land on the flowers, some of the pollen sticks to them, and they pollinate the flowers as they fly from one to the next. The next kind of species interaction is referred to as commensalism. The idea behind commensalism is that one species benefits, and for the other one, it's basically neutral. It doesn't help it or hurt it. There are many examples of commensalism, but one easy one to think about is, if you've ever seen Finding Nemo, a clownfish and a sea anemone. In this interaction, the clownfish benefits because it gets protection. It can hide inside the sea anemone, but for the sea anemone, it's really not a positive or a negative interaction. Other common examples of this, if you're not familiar with Finding Nemo or the idea of clownfish, would be an example of a squirrel living in a tree. It makes its nest in the tree, it gives it its home, it's a place for it to store its food, its protection from predators, but for the tree, it's really no different one way or another. The tree isn't helped by the squirrel, but isn't harmed by the squirrel either. So same idea with a bird making its nest in a tree. Any interaction like that would fall under the idea of commensalism, where we have one species that benefits, and then for the other species, the interaction is pretty much neutral. Our final one that we're going to look at is parasitism. We talked a little bit about parasites when we were discussing different consumer types, so you should already be familiar with this, but our general definition for parasitism, just looking at it as a type of species interactions, is that one species benefits while the other species is harmed. An example of this from nature, from somewhere around us, would be an example of a tick living on a deer, or living on a rabbit, or even a person. Another example has to do with insects. This picture is an example of wasp larvae that were laid on the back of a hornworm. So the wasps land on the back of the hornworm, they lay their eggs. When the eggs hatch, the larvae begin to develop. The hornworm then acts as a food source for the larvae as they're developing. So all these little white larvae along the back are actually going to eat the hornworm as they're growing into the adult wasp stage. So it's a good example of the idea of parasitism. One individual benefits. We've got all these little wasp larvae. It's good for them, but this is a very bad deal for our poor hornworm here. So there are many, many examples of parasites. The difference to remember between this and the idea of what we'll soon call predation, but the way a carnivore would eat its prey, is that parasitism takes a long time. So these larvae will take many, many days in order to kill the hornworm, whereas something that's a true predator is going to catch and kill its prey very quickly. So hopefully this helps you straighten out some of the ideas with the different types of species interactions. We'll talk about a few of these a little bit more in class tomorrow. As always, thank you for watching.